This interview is with Dr. Duncan Robertson, Director of Impact and Radar Expert at the University of St Andrews Physics Department. During our conversation, we discussed the fun he has researching, his first job, and his love of photography. Enjoy listening. You're listening to Insight, the University of St Andrews Student Physics Society's podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Lavery. Join us as we journey into the lives of St Andrews academics, discovering their passions, inspirations, and motivations. So, after a small hiatus, we are now back on Insight, and today we are joined by Dr. Duncan Robertson from the University of St Andrews Physics Department. Thanks for joining us.
Hi Sam, nice to be with you.
So, Duncan, first things first, what are your positions here at St Andrews?
Well, my main position is Principal Research Fellow in the millimetre wave and EPR group, so that's a research-only position, and I can tell you a little bit more about what I do in due course. But I also have a management role within the School of Physics and Astronomy, and that is Director of Impact.
And what does that entail?
Well, impact is the tangible benefit that research brings to the world outside of academia. So it could be economic impact, it could be social and policy impact. Really, this is of increasing importance in research nowadays, and that essentially governments and bodies that fund research want to see a return on their investment, and that it's not just benefiting the happy little campers in the ivory tower beavering away and enjoying their research, but actually that some of that research is having a tangible benefit to the world outside.
So it's how many people outside of academia see the benefits of academia.
Yes.
So what path led you to your position here at St Andrews then?
Well, I guess when I was young, I just had quite an innate interest in how stuff worked and how things were made, particularly electronics. And I was kind of fascinated by making things, building things. I was quite into mechano and wiring up little circuits, stuff like that. And enjoyed the sciences at school, enjoyed physics and chemistry. And I guess from probably late high school, I was pretty keen on doing physics as a degree at university. And then I applied to 3 different places, St Andrews, Heriot-Watt and Strathclyde, and well, I came here. Back in 1987, my family have a tradition of coming here as well, which probably had something to do with it, and perhaps also the contrast from where I grew up, which is Pitlochry, small town in the Highlands, to a small town in northeast Fife, was not as great as going to one of the big cities. So I came and did physics and electronics, which was a joint degree back in those days. And enjoyed it very much. And my brother was also at the university at that stage. He's 5 years older than me. He'd done the same degree, and he was doing a PhD in the millimetre wave group. I got a summer job working for another PhD student, Andy Harvey, who's now Professor of Optics at Glasgow University. And I spent the summer building circuits for him. So with lots of lead fumes later, I got quite good at soldering, after I graduated, I was pretty keen on doing research, and I was pretty keen on what was going on in the millimetre wave group led by Jim Lasserf. And I was fortunate through minor sets of coincidences to be able to get a place to do a PhD in the group, and then most of my career has been with it.
Fantastic. So you spent a while at St Andrews and you've been doing good research here the whole time. So could you tell us a bit about your research as well then?
Yes, so the millimetre wave group specialises in instrumentation development. It's essentially a hardware development group, and it develops instruments for various measurement applications in the millimetre wave range. And
millimetre wavelength of light.
Yes, electromagnetic radiation. So there's a 30 to 300 gigahertz range, plus or minus a bit. And nowadays the group is kind of in two halves in terms of applications. So one part is looking at electron spin resonance, or it's a magnetic resonance spectroscopy technique. And Graham Smith, who runs the group, he leads that activity. And we develop instrumentation to do that with very high performance. And the other side of the group, which is what I run and look after, is millimeter wave radar. And we research millimeter wave radar for applications in security and environmental monitoring. And they might sound quite different application areas, but actually the technology is pretty common to both. And the systems that we develop for one inform the design of future systems we develop for the other side of the group. So it's a very kind of cross-cutting technological approach that's applied to both sides of the group's research.
So it develops a lot of expertise, which is applicable in those two areas as well.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
What's your favourite thing in or about this research then?
It's very varied, and fundamentally it's applied problem solving. And that's, I think, what sparked my interest when I was a kid, was how you do stuff that solves problems, how you build things that achieve a certain function. And it means we get to work with a large diversity of end users, whether it's volcanologists or security staff at airports or glaciologists, meteorologists, all sorts of people, and they have an application that we can apply our technology to. And so it means you're exposed to a diversity of scientific disciplines, interesting people, and a lot of what we do is field deployment of instruments. So we get to go to cool and interesting places around the world. So it's not just sitting at the bench all the time.
And I know that one of the recent things that you've been able to do is go out and take measurements of commercially available drones. But that's sort of a relatively recent development in terms of like being commercially accessible. And this is something that the radar group has reacted to. But how quickly does physics research generally adapt to the world outside of academia?
I suspect in terms of applied research, not as quickly as industry would like, or not as quick as industry does sometimes. I think speaking to people in industry, they are very good at identifying problems that really need addressed and throwing resources at doing that. Usually, well, principally because they've identified a market opportunity. There's money to be made in it, because that's what business does. I think it probably varies across academia and across universities. I don't think it would be right of me to say, with my limited knowledge in general, whether we're fast or slow to respond. I think probably it's getting faster, and that there's more interest, particularly because of the impact agenda, in solving real-world problems. And so there are a lot of research funding calls which are on sort of challenge focus areas, which are addressing real-world problems. So the funding bodies are sort of becoming a little bit more focused in directing money towards certain areas.
Okay, so there's sort of a wide range of reactances, but maybe as a general trend, people are getting a bit quicker to react.
Yes, I think possibly.
Okay, so for many people, drones are a toy, but obviously you work with them in terms of being able to take measurements and data and then build the equipment to do that. So how fun would you describe your research as being?
Oh, massively. Certainly on the days where we go flying drones or some of the other field work that we do. I mean, it's... So we're interested in how radar can be used to detect and track and classify drones from the perspective of security, where you want to identify that a drone has entered an area that you don't want it to be in.
For example, Gatwick Airport.
Well, airports are an obvious example that hit the news all the time, but there are many, many other locations where you don't really want drones flying overhead or nearby. They can be national infrastructure locations, power plants, nuclear power stations, could be transport hubs, prisons. There's a big issue because drugs and weapons are brought into prisons by drones. But also for more sort of commercial reasons, pop concerts, sporting events, sports stadia, and for privacy, people don't want drones flying over their ground. So, if you've got your multi-million-pound yacht on the French Riviera, you may want to consider some sort of technology that can detect whether somebody's trying to snoop on you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So being involved in that kind of work is fundamentally stimulating because I think it's an important thing to do, but it is it's an exciting challenge, and it's fun. It's got some real upsides to going out and flying drones and taking data, and when you do that kind of field measurement, it's pretty rewarding, particularly when it goes well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So work can be intellectually stimulating and fun, which is always nice to hear.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference in the timescales that physics research has an impact versus research in other STEM fields such as computer science or biology? Or how large are those differences?
It would be difficult to generalize.
Sorry, it's possibly unfair to ask you such a general question.
Yeah. Maybe there is a perception that in engineering disciplines that is somehow already closer to end use and problem solving. Obviously, fundamental physics research is long term, and blue sky research has its place, and you can't do without it. I think institutions vary, so I think some institutions are perhaps more reactive and better at applied problem solving and working closely with industry than others. Maybe with software, and you used CompSci as an example, with software, perhaps sometimes the barriers to implementation are lower because you're not developing hardware, which inevitably has a cost and time barrier. I'm sure CompSci colleagues would hate me for saying this, but you're only writing code.
Okay, so although there's sort of, again, a range, it really, there's a place for all types of research almost.
Yeah.
So you've said that you work with a lot of like industry or maybe defense groups as well outside of physics. But what do you think are the benefits of doing your research in an academic environment as opposed to industry?
Yeah. I think that's become very evident to me over the years that in many cases working in industry can be quite restrictive. It's principally dominated by the need to run a business, so it's financially driven, and quite often structures are in place in companies that make operating quite rigid. And so there's often a lot less flexibility about how you go about doing things than in university. There is a big flexibility. And sometimes I think when you approach people to discuss collaboration or access to facilities or so on, if you are from a university, they are a little bit more open to helping you out. Whereas if you said you're from a company, they'll say, how much are you going to pay? So I think flexibility is probably
there's a bit more flexibility, and that benefits the research.
Yeah.
How often do sort of networking events with like industry or other universities? How often does that lead to a fruitful partnership?
I don't have any statistics on a strike rate, but I've been to lots of such events over the years where academia and industry speakers will present their work or their technology offerings or technology wants, and you meet and you have coffee and blah, blah, blah. And it really just depends on, are the right people in the same room at the same time? So there's a bit of chance, but I think if you go to an event, whether it's a conference or a knowledge transfer network event or something like that, and you come away with 2 or 3 contacts and you follow them up, and one of them continues, you're doing well. And if actually given 6 months, it's actually turned into something. I think if that happens once or twice a year, you're probably doing quite well. You could spend your life going to such events, but you still have to be at home doing some of the research as well.
Okay, so yeah, it's not always, but if the stars align, it can be a good thing.
Yeah.
So if a university researcher produces a marketable product, how does the researcher benefit from that?
Okay, at St Andrews, if you're an employee, so a postdoc or an academic, there are clearly defined rules about how any royalty revenue that the university receives is distributed to the inventor and to the university. And I forget what the numbers are, but the share that comes to the inventor is quite generous compared with similar schemes in industry, where often you'll get a totally token amount or even just a pat on the head and a pan drop, as the saying goes, a sort of tally-ho chaps, well done. Whereas, the terms are good for academics.
Okay, so it does vary across institutions and everything, but there is some sort of predefined agreement. Is it common for physics researchers to be approached by companies outside of academia with job offers or headhunters?
I don't know about being approached. Now, approaching whom? Students or researchers? Yeah, I think it's not uncommon because physics researchers are skilled people whose skills can be applied to a great many disciplines and so are sought after in industry. So I think it is a very employable career option. And if a company is looking for people with certain skills and they know that there's research in that activity happening in your institution, it's highly likely that they would approach you directly or through some contact.
It's not an uncommon thing, and
no.
Physicists are sought after.
Yes.
Moving on to some more general questions. How much did you interact with lecturers outside of classes when you were a student? And do you think things are different now, maybe?
I think not very much at all. It was a little bit more them and us, in that academic staff delivered the teaching, and you went to lectures, you went to your tutorials, you did the labs, but you didn't particularly interact with them a great deal outside of that. It changed a bit in, I guess, fourth year. So in those degrees, in those days, a BSc degree, 4 years was what was on offer. And you're doing your final year project, so you kind of get to know people a bit more, and they're a bit more, I don't know. It definitely helps in St Andrews having been to the Burn, because you get to know people in a slightly more alcohol lubricated scenario, which is always good. So I think
the Burn is a student staff academic retreat for a weekend, and as Duncan has said, it's a little bit alcohol lubricated,
or very much so in some cases. Yeah.
So, is there anything you miss from your student life? In a not entirely unrelated note, maybe.
Without being completely incriminating, and it was just good fun. I mean, I've made so many good friends and friends for life at university, and just had the best time here. It wasn't all plain sailing, but overall it was a fantastic 4 years. I really enjoyed it. Loads of good friends, lots of good social stuff, and I managed to get a physics degree as well.
Yes, always a perk by the end of uni having a degree. What was your first job? Can you remember why you got it?
I remember washing dishes at a hotel in Pitlochry for 95 pence an hour in circa 1986.
And presumably the reason you wanted it was the 95 pence an hour.
Yeah, because, back in those days that could buy you a Highland estate. I didn't do it for very long. They didn't have a dishwasher, so everything was by hand through the sink, which seems kind of mind-boggling. But my main first job was a job I created for myself. I was self-employed as a gardener, and I did the garden for various people around Pitlochry. kind of mostly old ladies, of which there are plenty, even then. And so I would do mowing, weeding, general garden maintenance, and it provided me with enough pocket money to fund my very minimal sort of interests at the time.
Good stuff. What's one of the small things that you appreciate in life?
The beauty of something you can see under a microscope. I only say that because I was doing some surface mount soldering this morning. The small things in life, what is it small? Simple things. Our beautiful country. I love being outside in Scotland and close to home. Just being outside and enjoying that is really nice. So it's a simple thing. It's maybe not a small thing, but
sort of having access to the Scottish scenery at a moment's notice is yeah. I would agree. That's a great thing to have on hand. What's a challenge that you're proud of having completed or having set out to achieve?
It's like a job interview question, isn't it? Still being here. Hopefully being successful. There's been many sort of professional ones over the years in terms of building radar systems, delivering them to customers or completing projects successfully.
Does one stand out?
I suspect probably that an obvious one in recent years was the European funded Consortis project, which was on airport security. And we collaborated with 11 partner organizations in 5 countries over 4 years to develop new imaging technology for concealed object detection, suitable for use in future airports. And that essentially was based around 2 sensors, a passive camera, sub-millimeter wave camera developed in Finland, and a sub-millimeter wave 3D imaging radar, which we led the development for. And I drove that side of the project, and many partners contributed to it, but we assembled it here and tested it, and testament to the hard work of my colleagues. It worked extremely well, and it set new standards in that technology. And at the end of the project, the independent reviewers assigned by the European Union were very positive in how the whole project had gone, and said that it was kind of a beacon of success for EU collaborations, which don't often go that well or stay collaborative. But throughout our Consortis project, we really did. And so, yeah, that is something I do feel very proud about.
Yeah, and I definitely think, leading half of the development on an international project on such a scale is something to be proud of. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving on, what is your favourite hobby?
I enjoy cycling, and I also I'm interested in photography, but I just don't really do very much of it at the moment. I struggle to find the time. So I'm very interested in photography. I'm actually run my local camera club now. But I suppose my active hobby that I do is a bit of cycling.
And when you are doing your hobbies, do you prefer to do it as a solitary or group activity? Does it vary between cycling and photography?
Cycling, I'm happy to cycle on my own, but I also have a couple of pals that I cycle with. So that's nice because there's quite a social element there. And if it includes a coffee stop, even better. Photography, actually doing photography, I find is essentially a fairly solitary thing because you just get into it and you're doing your own thing. The social aspect of photography is within the camera club, and we meet weekly between September and April. And that's good fun and sociable, and it's nice to see people regularly like that. And because I also set the syllabus, I've lined up loads and loads of different speakers to come and talk and present and give workshops and educate. And so I'm looking forward to meeting all these people and hearing what they've got to say, and That should be fun over the next few months.
Fantastic. I hope it gets off to a good start. Do you have any long-running hobby projects, like maybe a photography series that you're doing, or a cycling route that you're setting out to go through?
No, that's not a sort of modus operandi that I've ever really had, is sort of very long-term projects or ongoing goals. I have signed up to do the Étape Caledonia Sportive ride in May near Pitlochry, which is 85 miles, which for me will be a personal achievement because I haven't ever cycled that far in a day before. So I need to work towards that over the winter and avoid atrophying.
Is it going to be quite a hilly event? Because obviously cycling on the hills.
Yeah, I mean, it's
flats.
the roads I grew up cycling on, near Loch Tummel and Chehallion and so on. So I know what they are, and there are some big hills there, but I'm not frightened of that. It'll be fine. I just need to build up to it and make sure that I keep cycling January, February, March, April, which is tricky because it's dark and wet and cold a lot of the time. But generally, you just need better good clothes and lights.
And at least since you know the terrain, while everyone's looking the other way, you'll know where the shortcuts are.
Yes.
Are there any hobbies or activities that you'd still like to try?
I've always fancied going up in a glider, and the Scottish Gliding Centre is close to where I live, so, it could be a possibility. And we were talking the other day about hot air ballooning. That also looks fun, but just for a ride, not to do on a regular basis. Possibly a few experiences. I would enjoy going back to hill walking a bit more. I used to do a lot in school, and I haven't really done any for a long time. But being out on the hills is good fun, and it goes well with photography, actually.
So something you can take your camera along to and gain elevation, basically.
Yes.
So moving on to some quick fire questions.
Right.
What is your favourite music genre and favourite song?
Ooh. Music genre. Tricky.
It's always tricky. It's
rock,
possibly the hardest.
Blues rock. Favourite song? It depends what mood I'm in. Is there a song you come back to, maybe, again and again? Well, lots of stuff by AC/DC, Deep Purple, things like that. Tom Petty. I couldn't pick one out.
Not one at all.
Big Balls by AC/DC.
Do you prefer to holiday in the city or in the countryside?
Well, it depends. Because they offer different things. Our last summer holiday this summer was in Girona in northern Spain. So we were in a large town, small city, and we went to Barcelona. And so that was really good fun and enjoyed that. But I do also like countryside outdoor.
Either or.
As well. Either or, yeah.
Favourite sandwich filling?
Ham and mustard.
Ham and mustard. Good choice, fair enough. What's your favourite sport to watch or follow?
Cycling. Yeah.
And that lines up.
Pretty one-dimensional there.
And is there a sport that you just can't abide at all?
Many. Cricket, I have no interest in. Horse racing, no interest in. There are a couple that might spring to mind.
What would be your dream car to own?
Porsche 911.
Porsche 911.
Always has been.
And what's your favourite pub in St Andrews?
Ooh, well, not living here, I don't go to the pub very often, but I guess the Way Pat.
Post or pre-renovation?
Well, it was fine then, but it's okay now in a different, slightly shinier, more tweedy way. Of course, in the old days, the cellar bar was where I spent an awful lot of time.
Aikman's Cellar Bar.
Aikman's, yeah, it's still the cellar bar. Actually, the Russell Hotel. I probably spent more time in there subsidising Gordon de Vries's pension than any other place. He's a lovely. He and Fiona are lovely people. It was a superb place, great bar. So I have a very soft spot for the Russell as well.
The way Pat Aikman's or the Russell?
Right, the Russell top of the list.
Russell top of the list.
Just above the way.
Okay. So final question, and you can take some more time to answer this. So what are some shared values that you think all researchers share, whether they're working in academia, industry, or elsewhere?
Well, I would hope a sense of integrity and fairness and professionalism in doing their job and nice about it. So, as you've probably heard me say, that hopefully they've read the Don't Be a Dick policy.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Duncan Robertson, for joining us today. You've been listening to Insight, the University of St Andrews Student Physics Society's podcast. I was your host, Samuel Lavery. Thanks to the wonderful academics of St Andrews. Join us in the future as we learn more of the people making our education. This podcast was produced by myself and our podcast producer, Sabrina Keating. To find out more about the Physics Society and what we do, please find us on Facebook or Google St Andrews Physics Society or our website. Goodbye.